Christmas had always been a special time in my family. Since childhood, I had grown accustomed to the warm atmosphere of the holiday, even if it wasn't always filled with lavish gifts. My parents had never been the type to indulge in extravagance. They believed Christmas was about togetherness rather than material possessions. So, when I received a text from my mother one late December afternoon, I wasn't entirely surprised, but something about it felt different. The message was simple. "Sweetheart, just a heads up, Christmas will be simple this year. Money is tight, so we won't be doing big gifts, just the essentials." I sat still for a moment, the sweater in my hands still unfolded. I reread the message, and a heavy feeling settled in my chest. In previous years, even if we didn't have grand celebrations, Christmas always included gifts, a cozy meal, and, most importantly, a sense of family connection. But this time, something about the message felt definitive, as if a decision had been made without me. I replied, "Of course, Mom. No worries. The kids will understand." My response was lighthearted, but my emotions were not. I knew our financial situation well. My husband David and I weren't wealthy, but we always made an effort to create a meaningful holiday for our twins, Mia and Lucas. Each year, we saved up, choosing thoughtful gifts and wrapping them with care so that our children could experience the magic of Christmas morning. However, this time, my mother's message carried a sense of detachment that I couldn't shake. It wasn't just about money, it felt like an exclusion, a decision made without any discussion. Normally, my mother would call to discuss Christmas plans, asking what we should do, what meals to prepare. But this time it was a short, matter-of-fact text, leaving me with a lingering sense of unease. Still, I reassured myself that Christmas wasn't about gifts, but about being together. In the days leading up to Christmas, I tried to push aside my worries. David and I continued our usual traditions. We picked out a small Christmas tree, hung twinkling lights, and made homemade decorations with Mia and Lucas. On Christmas Eve, we baked cookies together and left out milk for Santa. The kids eagerly placed their stockings by the fireplace, excited for the morning to come. On Christmas morning, their delighted squeals filled our modest living room as they unwrapped their gifts. The presents weren't extravagant, but they were chosen with love. We spent the day playing together, watching holiday movies, and sharing a simple but hearty meal. It wasn't a grand celebration, but it was filled with love, or so I told myself. Despite this, a nagging feeling remained in my chest. I had expected at least a phone call from my parents, a simple "Merry Christmas," but the day passed in silence. I tried not to let it dampen my mood, focusing on my family, but the absence of their usual presence lingered in the back of my mind. 2 days later, as I lounged on the couch scrolling through social media, I froze. A post from my sister caught my attention. The caption read, "Best Christmas ever." Beneath it was a series of pictures from my parents' house. My breath hitched as I swiped through the images. Their living room, decorated with an enormous tree draped in golden lights, stood as a dazzling centerpiece. Beneath it, an avalanche of beautifully wrapped gifts sprawled across the floor, shimmering in elegant silver and gold paper. In the middle of the scene, my 2 nieces, my sister's daughters, gleefully tore into expensive presents. Designer sneakers, high-end electronics, and a brand new tablet resting in my youngest niece's hands. A lump formed in my throat. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Had I misunderstood? Was this an old post? But no, the timestamp was clear. This was this year's Christmas, the very same Christmas that my parents had told me would be simple and only the essentials. I checked my messages again, hoping I had missed an invitation, a text, call, anything, but there was nothing. No mention of a family gathering, no explanation, no acknowledgement that my children and I existed during the holiday season. My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to believe there was some logical explanation, some misunderstanding. But deep down, I already knew the truth. My parents had lied, not just about the money, not just about the gifts, but about what we meant to them. They had deliberately excluded me and my children from Christmas while showering my sister's kids with luxuries. I wasn't angry at my nieces, they were just children. I wasn't even angry at my sister. I had long accepted that she was my parents' favorite. But my parents, the ones who had raised me to believe that Christmas wasn't about gifts, that family mattered most, had made it painfully clear that we were not part of their family this year. The worst part? They had let my children believe that a small, simple Christmas was the only option. Meanwhile, they were creating a magical, extravagant holiday for someone else's kids. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling, my pulse hammering in my ears. And then, without hesitation, I went to my contacts and blocked their numbers. Not in anger, not in pettiness, but because sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. And this year, my Christmas gift to myself was peace. Blocking their numbers should have felt like closure, but instead, it felt like an open wound. The days after Christmas passed in a blur. I went through the motions, cooking, cleaning, playing with Mia and Lucas, but I felt hollow. The betrayal sat in my chest, heavy like a stone I couldn't swallow. David noticed. "Are you okay?" he asked one evening as we put the kids to bed. His voice was careful, knowing. I hesitated, then lied. Yeah, just tired. I kissed Mia's forehead before turning off the light. He didn't push, but I saw the way he watched me. The concern etched in his brow when he caught me staring off into space. Because how do you say out loud, my own parents don't care about me? How do you admit that you weren't just left out, you were discarded? 2 days after Christmas, I was curled up on the couch, lazily scrolling through my phone while the kids played with their modest but cherished gifts. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where time slips by unnoticed. David was in the other room, fixing a leaky faucet, and everything felt peacefully uneventful, until I saw it. A social media post, my sister's name, and the words that sent my heart plummeting into my stomach. Best Christmas ever. Curiosity turned into a gut-wrenching realization as I tapped the post and let the images flood my screen. My parents' living room, but not the one I had imagined. This wasn't the simple, financially strained Christmas they had described. No, this was a scene from a holiday movie, a perfect winter wonderland. A towering Christmas tree stood proudly in the corner, its golden lights twinkling like a dream, branches heavy with expensive, elegant ornaments. Below it, presents were stacked high, wrapped in shining silver and gold, ribbons tied in flawless bows. In the center of it all, my nieces sat, grinning ear to ear, tearing through what could only be described as a mountain of luxury. Brand new designer sneakers, the latest high-end electronics, a sleek, brand new tablet clutched in my youngest niece's small hands. My eyes darted across the photos, searching for something, anything, that would make this make sense. But the truth was staring back at me, undeniable and cruel. I wasn't invited. My kids weren't invited. Our Christmas had been quiet, simple, because we were never meant to be part of this Christmas. I swallowed hard, my breath uneven. Maybe this was an old post, a memory from a previous year. Frantically, I checked the timestamp, December 25th. This year. A sharp ache spread through my chest. I scrolled through my messages, my fingers trembling, hoping, praying that I had missed something. Maybe a forgotten text, a call, even the smallest acknowledgement that we were still part of the family. But there was nothing. No invite, no explanation. Just silence. The betrayal hit like a tidal wave. I had spent Christmas convincing myself that gifts didn't matter, that being together, even just the four of us, was enough. But now, I knew the truth. My children had spent the holiday believing their grandparents couldn't afford gifts. They had unwrapped small, thoughtful presents under a modest tree, blissfully unaware that somewhere else, their cousins were tearing into a lavish, extravagant celebration, one that my parents had deliberately chosen to exclude us from. I set my phone down, my hands cold despite the warmth of the room. My heart pounded as a series of thoughts raced through my mind, each one more painful than the last. Had they even thought about Mia and Lucas while they watched my nieces unwrap their expensive gifts? Had they felt even a flicker of guilt? Or was this just the way things had always been? The unspoken hierarchy, the favoritism I had spent my entire life trying to ignore. David walked in at that moment, wiping his hands on a towel. What's wrong? I hesitated. How could I even begin to explain this? How do you put into words the slow, dawning realization that the people who raised you never saw you as enough? I turned my phone toward him, my voice barely above a whisper. Look. He took one glance and his jaw clenched. David had always been patient, steady, the kind of person who could brush off most things. But, in that moment, I saw the anger flicker in his eyes. They didn't even tell us, I said, my voice hollow. They just left us out. He exhaled slowly, setting my phone down. You knew this would happen, he said gently, though his voice was tight. Maybe not like this, but you knew. I wanted to argue, to say that no, I hadn't known, that I had still believed, despite everything, that my parents wouldn't be so cruel. But deep down, I had known. I had spent years making excuses, brushing aside the little slights, convincing myself that it wasn't intentional. But this wasn't an accident. This was a choice. The weight of that truth settled deep into my bones. I picked up my phone again, staring at the images, the words in my sister's caption blurring together. Best Christmas ever. For them, maybe. But for me, for my children, it had been a lie, and I wasn't going to keep pretending. Without hesitation, I opened my contacts and scrolled to my parents' names. I hovered over them for a moment, my thumb hesitating, then I hit block. Not out of anger, not out of pettiness, but because I was done. Done fighting for scraps of love. Done pretending I mattered to people who had made it clear I didn't. The silence that followed wasn't the relief I had hoped for. It felt like an open wound, raw and exposed. I went through the motions of the next few days, cooking, cleaning, playing with Mia and Lucas, but I felt like a ghost in my own life. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest, a dull ache that refused to fade. David noticed. You okay? He asked one night as we tucked the kids into bed. I forced a smile. Just tired. But he saw right through me. He always did. I expected my parents to reach out, to at least try to explain. But the days stretched into silence. Not a call, not a text, nothing. Then my sister's name popped up on my screen. The phone buzzed once, then again. And finally a message came through. I saw that you blocked Mom and Dad. What is wrong with you? Not I'm sorry. Not we should talk. Not even a hint of guilt or understanding. Just blame. I stared at the message, my pulse hammering in my ears. What was wrong with me? David found me sitting on the edge of the bed, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles were white. They didn't even try to deny it, I whispered. He sat beside me. They knew what they were doing, Daisy, and they don't care that it hurt you. I swallowed, the familiar sting of tears burning behind my eyes. He was right. They had chosen my sister, chosen her kids, chosen to lie to me, to let my children believe Christmas had to be small and simple, while somewhere else they were celebrating with an abundance of love, laughter, and gifts. That wasn't an accident. That was a decision. And for the first time in my life, I decided something too. I opened my sister's message, my fingers steady as I typed. They told me they couldn't afford Christmas for my kids this year, but they could afford this. Explain that to me. Her response came almost instantly. It's not a big deal, Daisy. Mom and Dad just wanted to do something nice for the girls. You're overreacting. Overreacting. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't just about Christmas. This was how they saw me. Less than an afterthought, a shadow on the outskirts of my own family. For the first time, I stopped pretending otherwise. And for the first time, I didn't just feel hurt. I felt free. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hands, the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest like a stone. My sister's response replayed in my mind, each word sharpening the sting of realization. It's not a big deal, Daisy. Mom and Dad just wanted to do something nice for the girls. You're overreacting. Overreacting. That word rattled in my skull, an echo of every time I'd been dismissed, every moment my feelings had been minimized, every time I had been made to feel like I was imagining things. But I wasn't imagining anything. The proof had been right there, plastered across social media for the world to see. The golden glow of the Christmas tree, the laughter of my nieces as they unwrapped luxury gifts, the sheer extravagance of it all. Meanwhile, my children had spent Christmas morning believing their grandparents couldn't afford more than the essentials. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was a decision. And I had made one too. I opened my messages and typed my final response to my sister. I hope your daughters had a wonderful Christmas. Mine had to settle for small and simple, because that's what Mom and Dad told me we could afford. Now I know where I stand in this family, so do me a favor, don't contact me again. I hit send. Then, without hesitation, I blocked her too. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because I was done. Done waiting for them to see me. Done hoping for an apology that would never come. Done making myself small just to fit into a space that was never meant for me. A strange sense of finality settled over me, but it wasn't relief. It was grief. Grief for the illusion I had held onto for so long, the belief that no matter what, family would always be family. The next few days passed in a haze. I went through the motions, cooking, cleaning, playing with Mia and Lucas, but I felt hollow. The weight of rejection sat in my chest, an ache I couldn't quite shake. David noticed. Of course, he did. He always did. You okay? He asked one evening as we tucked the kids into bed. I hesitated for half a second before forcing a smile. Just tired. He didn't push, but I saw the way he watched me, the way his brows pulled together when he caught me staring into space, lost in thought. Because how do you say out loud, my own parents don't care about me? How do you admit that you weren't just forgotten? You were discarded. I expected silence from my parents after blocking them. I expected maybe a half-hearted text from my mother, something vague and dismissive. But days passed, then a week, and there was nothing. Until there was. It started with gossip. A mutual friend casually mentioned that my sister had been venting about me. Then another reached out with a careful, "Hey, is everything okay with your family? Your mom seems upset." Upset? She was upset. She had cut me out of Christmas. She had watched my children unwrap their modest gifts while knowing she had showered my nieces with luxury. She had excluded us, lied to me, and let my children believe there was no other choice. And she was upset. I ignored the messages, but then David came home from work one evening, his face tight. "Your dad called me." I stiffened. "What?" David exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "He said he's worried about you, that you're acting irrationally by cutting off the family." A short, humorless laugh escaped me. So I'm the irrational one, not the people who lied to me and excluded my kids from Christmas. David shook his head. "I told him you were done being treated like you don't matter." "And you know what he said?" I crossed my arms, bracing myself. "What?" He said, "You don't cut off family, no matter what." A slow, burning anger rose in my chest. No matter what. No matter if they lie to you, no matter if they show blatant favoritism, no matter if they hurt you. I clenched my jaw, my hands curling into fists. This wasn't just about Christmas. This was about a lifetime of being second place. That night, I pulled out an old photo album I hadn't touched in years. As I flipped through the pages, the pattern became painfully clear. My sister at the center of every family event, beaming, surrounded by love and attention, and me, always just slightly to the side. Present, but never the priority. I remembered birthdays where she got the bigger party, the brand new bike while I got her old one. The way my parents had beamed with pride at her dance recital but barely acknowledged when I made honor roll. And now, Christmas was just one more reminder of where I stood. Or rather, where I didn't. I shut the album with a quiet thud and exhaled shakily. I had spent years making excuses for them, telling myself it wasn't intentional, that maybe I was imagining it, but I wasn't, and I wasn't going to pretend anymore. The next morning, I sat Mia and Lucas down at the kitchen table. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Lucas asked, frowning. I took a deep breath. "I just wanted to talk to you both about something important, about family." Mia's eyes widened. "Are we in trouble?" I smiled softly. "No, sweetheart, but I want to tell you something I learned a little too late in life." They both sat up straighter, listening. "Family isn't just about who you're related to," which I said gently. "It's about the people who show up for you, the people who make you feel loved, not just when it's convenient for them, but always." Lucas tilted his head. "Like you and Daddy?" "Exactly," I said, reaching across the table to squeeze his small hand. Mia bit her lip. "Is this about Grandma and Grandpa?" I hesitated. Then finally I nodded. "Yes, it is." They exchanged a glance. They were young, but not oblivious. They had noticed things, though, even if they hadn't fully understood them. Lucas poked at his cereal. "They didn't come for Christmas." Mia frowned. "And they didn't get us anything." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "They love you," I said carefully, because I would never tell my kids otherwise. "But sometimes, people don't know how to show love the right way. And when people keep hurting you on purpose, you have to decide if you still want them in your life." Lucas frowned. "Like when someone is mean at school and doesn't stop." I nodded, my heart aching. "Just like that." Mia was quiet for a long moment. Then finally she asked, "So are we still seeing them?" I looked between my children, feeling the full weight of my decision. "No, sweetheart, we're not." Mia's eyes filled with tears. Not because she missed them, but because she understood. And that was the moment I knew. I wasn't just cutting them off. I was breaking the cycle. The days passed in silence. A silence that was supposed to feel like peace, like freedom. But instead it felt like an open wound, raw and exposed. I had expected something, anything from my parents. Maybe an attempt to explain, an apology, even just a defensive justification. But there was nothing. No calls, no texts, just emptiness where they used to be. Until the letter arrived. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter, my mother's handwriting unmistakable. My stomach twisted at the sight of it. I should have thrown it away. I should have ignored it. But old habits die hard, and curiosity, or maybe just a lingering need for closure, made me open it. "Daisy, sweetheart," it began. "Sweetheart." I stopped right there, already feeling my blood simmer beneath my skin. Sweetheart. That's how she started this? After what they had done? After choosing my sister over me, over my kids? I forced myself to keep reading. "I don't understand why you're doing this. We are family. Families have disagreements, but they always come back together. We never meant to hurt you. You're overreacting." There it was again. Overreacting. The same word my sister had used, the same dismissal I had heard my whole life. I clenched my jaw, but I kept going. "We thought you understood that things have been hard financially. We didn't have enough to do a big Christmas for everyone, so we did what we could. Your sister has been struggling too, you know? She needed our help. Why are you punishing us for that?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. So that was their excuse, that they had to choose, that there simply wasn't enough for everyone. That there had been enough for a mountain of gifts. Enough for luxury decorations. Enough for an extravagant celebration. Just not enough for us. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the trash. 3 days later, a text arrived. This time, from my aunt. "Hey Daisy, I just had a long talk with your mom. She's really upset. She's been crying over this whole thing. She doesn't understand why you're being so harsh. You know how much she loves you, right?" I rolled my eyes. There it was, the classic guilt trip. When they couldn't bully me into compliance, they tried shaming me into forgiveness. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat there, staring at the message, letting the weight of it sink in. My mother had been crying. Crying. Where were those tears when my kids sat by a tiny tree, unwrapping gifts they believed were all their grandparents could afford? Where was her heartbreak when my nieces were showing off their designer sneakers and brand new electronics? Where was her sadness when I found out through a social media post that my own parents had celebrated Christmas without us? She wasn't crying because she had hurt me. She was crying because she had lost control of me. For the first time in my life, I was refusing to be the daughter who swallowed her feelings just to keep the peace. I took a deep breath and finally typed my response. She's not upset because she hurt me. She's upset because I finally stood up for myself. And if you can't understand that, then maybe you should stop being her messenger. I hit send. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The final attempt came from an unexpected place, an old friend of my mother's, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a Facebook message. "Daisy, I just wanted to reach out. Your mom is devastated. She doesn't know how things got so bad between you. She asked me to tell you she loves you. She's heartbroken over what's happened. I know you're upset, but can't you just talk to her?" Life is too short for this kind of grudge. I stared at the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. They still didn't get it. This wasn't a grudge. This was a boundary, a decision to stop chasing people who made it clear I wasn't a priority. And yet, they refused to acknowledge what they had done. There was no apology, no accountability, just more manipulation. This time I responded with only one sentence. If she's heartbroken, it's only because she finally got treated the way she treated me. That night, David found me sitting on the couch, my phone face down beside me. More messages? He guessed. I nodded. More guilt trips. He sat down beside me, watching me closely. You okay? I thought about it for a moment, and then to my surprise I realized I was. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my parents to care. I wasn't desperate for their approval. I wasn't grasping at the hope that one day they'd treat me the way I had always treated them. I was done, and that felt like freedom. David took my hand, giving it a squeeze. Good. And just like that, I stopped looking back. The morning was quiet, but the weight in my chest was anything but. I watched as Mia and Lucas ate their breakfast, their laughter light and unbothered, completely unaware of the storm that had been raging inside me for days. They had no idea how much I had agonized over this moment, over the truth I was about to tell them. I cleared my throat. Hey guys, can we talk for a minute? Mia looked up, spoon halfway to her mouth. Are we in trouble? I forced a small smile. No, sweetheart, I just want to talk about something important. Lucas tilted his head, curious. About what? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. About family. They both straightened, sensing the shift in my tone. You know how we always say family is about love? About the people who show up for you no matter what? I asked gently. Mia nodded slowly. Like you and Daddy. Exactly, I said, feeling my throat tighten. Family isn't just about who you're related to. It's about the people who make you feel loved and safe. Not just when it's easy, but always. Lucas frowned. Is this about Grandma and Grandpa? I hesitated, then nodded. Yes, baby, it is. They exchanged a glance, understanding flickering across their young faces. They had noticed things, even if they hadn't fully understood them before. Lucas poked at his cereal. They didn't come for Christmas. Mia's voice was quieter. And they didn't get us anything. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet their eyes. They love you, I said carefully, because I would never tell my children otherwise. But sometimes, people don't know how to show love the right way. And when people keep hurting you over and over, you have to decide whether you still want them in your life. Lucas frowned, deep in thought. Like when someone at school is mean all the time and doesn't stop? I nodded, my heart aching. Just like that. Just like that. So? Are we still going to see them? I looked between them, knowing the weight of my answer. No, sweetheart. We're not. There was a pause. Then Mia's eyes filled with tears, not because she missed them, but because she understood. Lucas, always more pragmatic, simply nodded. Okay, can we make pancakes now? A watery laugh escaped me. Yeah, baby, we can make pancakes. And just like that, something inside me shifted. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to fix something that was never mine to fix. I wasn't waiting for people to change. I was choosing peace. The days turned into weeks, and the silence stretched on. No calls, no messages, nothing but the quiet clarity of knowing I had made the right decision. Then, the letters started coming. The first one arrived in an envelope with my mother's familiar handwriting. My stomach twisted at the sight of it. I should have thrown it away. I should have ignored it, but I didn't. Old wounds have a way of making you curious, even when you know better. Daisy, sweetheart, it began. I stopped right there. Sweetheart. As if nothing had happened, as if we were still pretending. I skimmed through the rest of it, the words blurring together. We are family. Families work through things. We never meant to hurt you. You're overreacting. You need to let this go. There it was again. Overreacting. The same dismissal I had heard my entire life. The same justification for why my pain didn't matter. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the trash. 3 days later, a text arrived from my aunt. Daisy, I talked to your mom. She's really upset. She doesn't understand why you're being so harsh. You know how much she loves you, right? I rolled my eyes. The guilt tripping had begun. They weren't reaching out because they were sorry. They weren't reaching out because they wanted to fix things. They were reaching out because they had lost control of me. I let the message sit there, unread, unacknowledged. But the more I stared at it, the more I realized I needed to say something. She's not upset because she hurt me, I finally typed. She's upset because I finally stood up for myself. And if you can't understand that, then maybe you should stop being her messenger. I hit send. I thought that would be the end of it. But I was wrong. The last attempt came from a place I hadn't expected, an old friend of my mother's. A Facebook message, out of nowhere. Daisy, your mom is devastated. She doesn't know how things got this bad. She asked me to tell you she loves you. She's heartbroken over what's happened. I know you're upset, but can't you just talk to her? Life is too short for this kind of grudge. I stared at the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. They still didn't get it. This wasn't a grudge. This was a boundary, a decision to stop begging for love that should have been freely given. a refusal to continue accepting less than I deserved. This time, I typed only one sentence. If she's heartbroken, it's only because she finally got treated the way she treated me. That night, David found me sitting on the couch, my phone face down beside me. More messages? He guessed. I nodded. More guilt trips. He sat down beside me, watching me closely. Are you okay? I thought about it, really thought about it. And then to my surprise, I realized I was. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my parents to change. I wasn't hoping for an apology that would never come. I wasn't trying to squeeze myself into a space where I had never truly belonged. I was done. And that felt like freedom. David reached over, took my hand in his and squeezed it gently. Good. And just like that, I stopped looking back. The months passed like waves, one rolling into the next, carrying away the remnants of winter and the weight of the past. The cold, bitter ache of December had melted into spring, yet something inside me still felt frozen. At first, the silence from my parents was deafening. I had spent so much of my life bracing for their calls, their messages, their half-hearted apologies wrapped in justifications, but they never came. Instead, there was only stillness. And in that stillness, I learned something unexpected. Peace. One afternoon, as I sat outside watching Mia and Lucas chase each other across the yard, my phone buzzed. A message from Aunt Linda. I hesitated before opening it. Unlike the rest of my family, Linda had never been one for drama. She had always been kind, but we had never been particularly close. That's why her message surprised me. Hey Daisy, I know things have been rough. I just wanted to check in. No pressure, no expectations. Just, I'm here. A lump formed in my throat. I stared at the words, reading them over and over. Simple, genuine. No guilt trips, no backhanded pleas for me to fix things. Just, I'm here. I exhaled slowly, my fingers hovering over the keyboard before finally typing back. Thank you. That means more than you know. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A week later, another message came. If you're up for it, I'd love to have you and the kids over for dinner. No pressure. Just good food and company. I stared at the screen. It had been so long since an invitation had come without conditions, without hidden expectations. David glanced over from the kitchen. What's up? I looked at him, then back at the message. Linda invited us over. Just dinner. No strings attached. He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. Sounds nice? It did. More than nice. It sounded safe. That Saturday, we packed the kids into the car and drove to Linda's house. It wasn't grand like my parents' home, but it was warm. Lived in. The kind of place that felt like a real home, not just a house. Linda met us at the door, her face lighting up as she bent down to greet Mia and Lucas. You two must be freezing. Come inside, I made hot chocolate. The kids instantly adored her. As they settled in with their drinks, Linda led me into the kitchen, where the smell of home-cooked food wrapped around me like a hug. She didn't push, didn't pry. She just stirred a pot on the stove and said, I know you probably don't want to talk about it, but I just want you to know you don't deserve what they did to you. My breath hitched. I hadn't realized how much I had needed to hear those words until that moment. I took a shaky breath. Then why does it still hurt? Linda set the spoon down and turned to me, her eyes soft but steady. Because you're a good person, Daisy, and good people always hope for better. But sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is accept that they won't change, and stop waiting for them to. I looked around her cozy kitchen at the way she had welcomed us without hesitation, without expectation, and I realized something. Maybe I hadn't lost family. Maybe I had just found the ones who actually deserved to be called that. Dinner that night was different from any family meal I had ever known. There were no tense silences, no biting comments disguised as jokes. Just laughter. Real, unfiltered laughter. And when we left, Mia and Lucas were already asking when we could come back. As we drove home, David reached over and squeezed my hand. You okay? I smiled softly. Yeah, I think I am. Because maybe family wasn't about blood. Maybe it was about who showed up, who loved you without conditions, who made space for you without making you beg for it. Spring came quickly, washing away the cold remnants of winter. With it came something else, clarity. I no longer woke up expecting a call from my parents. I no longer hesitated before checking my messages, bracing for another guilt trip disguised as reconciliation. One afternoon, a final letter arrived. My mother's handwriting on the envelope. I didn't open it. Instead, I dropped it into the trash without a second thought. David raised an eyebrow. That easy? I met his gaze, the answer coming effortlessly. Yeah, it is. For years I had told myself that family was forever. That no matter how many times my parents chose my sister over me, no matter how many times I was treated like an afterthought, I had to hold on. Because that's just what family did. But I had finally learned the truth. Family isn't about DNA. It's about love. And the people who love you don't make you beg for a seat at the table. One evening, as I tucked Mia into bed, she looked up at me with wide, curious eyes. Mommy? I brushed a stray curl from her forehead. Yeah, baby? She hesitated. Do you think Grandma and Grandpa miss us? I swallowed, looking down at her little face, so full of innocence, so unaware of the weight behind that question. I don't know, baby, I said honestly. Lucas, who had been listening from his bed, tilted his head. Do you miss them? I thought about that. Did I? No, not really. Not in the way they wanted me to. I missed what I had thought we had, but I loved what we had now even more. Mia nodded as if she understood, in that simple, wise way that children often do, and just like that, it was enough. Months turned into a year, and in that time, I built something better than the family I had left behind. Something real, something whole, something worth holding on to.